Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. And today we are going to be looking at Grafana from Loki. And we also have Amit who has joined us. Hi Amit.
Hey folks.
All right. So today's session is going to be very interesting. We are going to look at a solution from Grafana for log aggregation called Loki. And before we go into the hands-on, let's look at a little details about Loki. So the first thing why you would want to use Loki versus any other log aggregation tool would be it's a lot easier to set up, and there's a less of a learning curve in terms of Loki, and also it's easier to scale horizontally versus other log aggregation tools like maybe Prometheus. Anything else you want to add, Amit, on this?
Cost being a very big factor in the current economic setup.
Right.
You basically, it's open source, it is widely accepted, and a lot of people contribute to it. So if you do find a bug, you can fix it yourself as well.
Right. And also, I think you can leverage S3 and AWS and other object storage for the storage, which makes it a lot more cheaper, right?
Absolutely. So you can store it wherever you want, whether it's in S3, your local setup, etc. So you can pick and choose based on how big your setup is, whether you want to make it enterprise ready or you are just playing with it on a Kubernetes cluster at home.
Correct. Right. Yeah. So let's look at the installation in the video forward now, and it's going to be very easy, and it kind of gives you an idea how easy it is to get started with Loki. Of course, this is not going to be production ready because you need a lot of other stuff you need to do, but this is a good starting ground, right? So let's move on to the next slide, and let's look at the architecture, how Loki works. So we start over here, and you have a set of nodes or virtual machines or databases or basically anything that you want to monitor for, or you want to capture the logs for. And then you install an agent like Promptail, or you can also use OpenTelemetry agent because it is fully supported with Loki. And so once you have these agents installed on these nodes, so you have node 1 here, and then you have node 2 here. What you can do is then these start transmitting the logs to a central Loki server which you have installed, right? And we'll see this in this upcoming session now, that this is the central Loki server which collects all these logs, right? So once the logs are collected over here at a central location on the type of storage that you want, you can then use connect it to different tools, like for example, Alert Manager based on some rules that you want to trigger alerts. You can connect it to the CLI, or the most common use case is you connect it to Grafana and use it to visualize the logs,
Yeah.
right?
One thing I would like to add is generally when you are trying to make it production ready, you would use both Grafana and Alert Manager, and you could automate the whole process of when someone creates a cloud function or a Lambda function, for example, automatically it also goes and creates an alert for that respective function in the background, and you can visualize those metrics within Grafana.
Cool. So what you're saying is that if somebody creates a cloud function or any other resource in the cloud, it can automatically be instrumented and set up so that you have alerts and all the other configurations, right?
Absolutely. So obviously there's some automation logic which needs to go into place, but it's definitely possible, and we have currently implemented for one of our clients on GCP setup.
Cool. Okay, that's good. All right. So let's look at the options that we have to install Loki. So you can install Loki on Docker. So we look at this today, and then you also have a Docker Compose setup, or you can do it as a standalone. And then and if you're working on Kubernetes, you can use Helm, or you can build it from source, right? All right. So with that, let's wrap up the slides and move on into the uh, practical session. So I have a GitHub repo over here, and I have a link to the Grafana official documentation also, which you can read through and get more information over here. But for the sake of this demo, we're just going to use the video, the GitHub steps over here. And so the first step is basically downloading the Loki config file. So just copy this. And what I'm going to do is just paste this over here, and it's going to download the file here. So this is the Loki config file that we've downloaded, and we could look at the file here, but for now we won't go into the details of this, right? Okay. Then we download the promtail config file. Okay, so we have two files now. One is the Loki config from the architecture diagram that we saw, and the other one is for the agent, right? So now what we're going to do is also spin up a Docker container for each of these components. So before I do that, let me just clean up my Docker container, Docker over here. And as we spin up these containers, you'll be able to see these containers over here, right? So let's run the Loki container first, and I'll just simply copy the command. And what it's doing is basically just loading this config file which we downloaded into the Loki container, right? And
Yeah.
it's exposing it on port 3100.
So this simplifies the whole process where Promtail will always scrape all our infrastructure for the logs and forward it to Loki.
Right. Yeah. So now we have this Loki container, and it's up and running, right? And it's running on port 3100. And we'll verify this also. So let's run the Promtail container. Okay. So this Promtail, let's go through the command. So this is basically taking the config file we just downloaded, and it's going to configure Promtail to run and monitor the the local machine at this location, right? Okay, so
Yeah.
let's look at the Docker container. Yeah, so we have a Promtail container now. Cool. So we now have an agent that's going to transmit data to the Loki server, and then you can have multiple agents like these. Let's look at the diagram again. So we just installed, this is our machine, our laptop, which is going to be monitored. We installed a Promtail agent. Now this agent is going to send the logs to the Loki server, right? So let's move ahead. Now, before we proceed, we need to verify if Loki is ready, right? So the way to do this is, you see, it's not ready yet. So it takes a while. Loki takes a while to get up and ready. So we just need to wait for a few seconds. In the meanwhile, what we'll do is look at the metrics that the Loki server itself also starts transmitting, right? So you will see some output like this. This means that the metrics is fine. It is transmitting metrics, right? So now let's look at this again. Cool. So now we see that the Loki server is ready, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's go. And so now that we have the Promtail agent and it is sending logs to the Loki server, we need to go and run the Grafana server.
So
So now
as
we
you
have,
can see, you would be able to mount any type of logs. As Farooq showed, you're mounting only var log, but that could be any path.
right. So any location where your application is writing logs is something that we can mount, and then the Promtail agent will start transmitting them, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. So now we have the Grafana container running, right? And what we need to do is open the Grafana container and log in, right? So we have, so the username and password is the same. Sorry.
Yes.
So I won't change the password for this demo. Cool. So now we are in Grafana. What we need to do is just follow the documentation over here, which is the last step. We go to connections and then click on data source. And then we need to just enter this as the URL. So I'll walk you through this. Go to data sources, add a data source. And you have Loki over here, which is one of the inbuilt connections, or you can just type it over here and look for it. Right. So now, wherever, if you have your Loki server exposed through a DNS or an IP, you can enter that here. But in our case, we have it on our machine and we are doing it from Docker. So that's the reason I need to put in this URL. Again, if you have authentication and other mechanisms, this is what you would do. Right. But for now, we'll just leave this as the default because we haven't changed anything in the config files that we saw here. Uh, so let me show that to you. So there are a lot of configurations that you can do over here, but this is something we won't get into right now. And I think this is generally when you would want to configure this is when you're doing a lot of hardening and you're doing this for production setups, right, Amit?
Yeah. So when you're making a system more production ready, all these manual steps would have been automated either in CI pipelines or in the form of Helm charts, etc., based on what type of infrastructure you're using, be it Kubernetes, be it VMs.
Cool. All right. So now we put in the URL and then we click on save and test. So if your connection is successful, sorry, you'll see a green tick over here. That means you have successfully connected to the Loki server, and then just save this. Now we can just go to explore and you should be able to see the logs over here. So for example, you can look at the file name and then these are all the files that are coming from the laptop and it will show you all these information about this file, right?
Yeah.
And it shows you the file name, the job, and the other details. So we'll have one more session for Grafana, and then we'll also probably go into the configuration for Loki and setting up on other environments. But for now, we just want to look at this and set up Loki, and you are able to transmit logs and do stuff over here. So that's all that we have for this video. Anything you want to add, Amit?
Probably if you all want to play around and just, for example, connect all the computers within your home and push all the logs into one specific location, just for playing around and testing purposes, do try that out and you all can forward all your different computers' logs via Promptail to one specific location or one specific computer and then read it through Loki to play around with it.
Right. Cool. And if you have any questions or any issues, feel free to comment on the video and we'll be happy to reply. Right. Thank you. And please follow and subscribe to us for more such videos on DevOps and observability. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.